Boom! According to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Yuko Simon. I'm here at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time every Sunday night. I have nothing else to do. Very good to see you all. Nice to see some people already rocking in, especially given that I only sent out actually set up the live stream about less than 5 minutes, about 3 minutes before. So great to see already. We've got Quint Rankid as well as Chris Rushton, a name I don't recognize, but great to see you in there. Mr. Cordy Chep, as always, great to see you. Kubras Tenshi, time for coffee in Tokyo tonight, or is it Toto? Who knows? Whatever gets you going. We've got Andrew. Good to see you, Andrew. Boom, indeed. Lots of booms coming back. We've got Aaron. Hey, Ada Void. Good morning, Arizona. Good to see you all. Great to see everybody. Hope you're having a good week. This has been a good week. It's been, well, again, from my perspective, it's been quiet. I've been particularly quiet on Twitter, particularly since I decided midweek to stop posting Wordle tweets every day. It was kind of fun, but yeah, I still haven't missed a day yet. And when you're passing it every day, I was running out of gifs like to attach expressing my journey of defeating it every day. And I don't know, it's getting, I sense it may be getting annoying posting a new GIF reacting to getting a word game every day. So I've stopped that. I will now post only if there is a particularly, like I get a hole-in-one, which, is not going to happen, or if I lose, I will post that. I will stay faithful to that. But between that and being super busy at work and stuff, I wasn't really even keeping up with news that much this week. So I've sort of been cramming in the last 24 hours or so, there are big things, of course, happening in the world. Two really big stories right now, of course. The one in Japan, being the reopening of Japan that I'm going to talk a little bit about. Of course, there are, as I say every week, there are some great channels out there with much better information. I'll recommend one of them, Unseen Japan, as well as, of course, Ninja Monkey is dedicated to gathering the best information about this. And if you're planning to travel, that's where you want to go. But I'll talk about that. The other, of course, is not really Japan related. Japan news has been fairly quiet, to tell you the truth, but I must say, Dan H, great to see you, bada boom indeed. And your Asianometry channel that you recommend, I love that. They did a great video the other day on the Smart Jet, I think they call it, the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries commercial, sort of small mid-range commercial airliner thing, and all the trouble that's been having and why. And some of it is fault and some of it kind of bad luck. But that was a great video. I mean, that's a great channel, so I do appreciate the recommendations. Also, good to see we've got Black Tingo. G'day indeed. We've got Dan H. Good to have you in here always. There hasn't been very many interesting stories about Japan the last couple of months. I kind of agree. That's a good. Sometimes, if it bleeds, it leads. In which case, no news is good news, right? It's kind of good that Japan has been peaceful, perhaps. So the main thing really is the opening up story. But there have been a few bits and pieces that I've picked up. Barry Convex, good to see you as always, and John Anderson. Everybody, be like John Anderson. You see what John Anderson did? If you say my name, it'll flash up there orange, and that way, one, you'll definitely get my attention when I scan through the comments in between stories, and two, if you want to say hello to me, if you want to be simply noticed, if you have a question, if you have a comment that you would like me to notice and pick up, do that. It flashes orange, and those are the ones that I'll pay attention to. John Anderson, hi from London. Good to see you there in London. Hope you're okay. You guys just had like a kind of a hurricane or something by the looks of it. You had some crazy weather. There is, by the way, up here as well, there is up top of Hokkaido, there is they reckon it's going to get down to 940 hectopascal, like a crazy depression, like deeper than a typhoon actually, going on up there at the moment. As usual, Tokyo's just lucky. We're just shielded by mountains on all the different sides, and it doesn't really affect us. But but I've heard it's pretty crazy there in London, so definitely stay safe. Mr. Cordy Chip. No interesting stories. Better get Taro Aso back to being prime minister again. Indeed. Get Yoshiro Mori. Sometimes no news. I believe me, I'm quite happy to have uneventful weeks. The other big story, by the way, I said two stories. The other big story is, of course, not Japanese. It's the fact that, I am just, on the one hand, I am alarmed with what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. In a way, I mean, we should be getting used to it by now, right? Russia's, Transnistria, Georgia, and South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Donbass, Crimea. They're, it's like they're national. It's like a fishing trip for Putin, like invading another country. And lately, at the request of the local dictator, Kazakhstan and Belarus. I mean, but yeah, so on the one hand, it's kind of crazy that why does this seem worse than a full-on invasion of Crimea, for example? But it really does feel that way. And yeah, I feel, and you know what, I feel bad. I do feel more bad for the people of Ukraine, but I'm thinking like for the Russian soldiers and stuff as well. Again, I don't want anyone to die, including Russian soldiers. I come from an army family, and they, if you're based in Eastern Siberia, facing Japan, like some of the units currently in Belarus they've shipped them all the way across Russia for this. And you just go where you're told to go, and you're trained years and years that if they tell you to do something, you do it. That's the job. And the idea that people on both sides are going to die is just like terrible. That said, of course, I definitely don't want it to happen. And if it happens, it's got to be painful for Russia, because otherwise they're going to keep on doing it like they've been doing. But I don't relish that at all. I mean, part of me thinks, screw these guys, let this be like another Chechnya for them. But on the other hand, Chechnya, was probably even worse for the Chechens. I mean, in the end of the day, they lost, didn't they? Than it was for the Russians. It was miserable for everybody. So you can't really wish for that. But man, it's just, I was sharing my conflicted thoughts about this earlier. I mean, the whole weird logic of it, that, Ukraine's scared of Russia, so it wants to join NATO for protection, and Russia is threatening to invade Ukraine because it wants to join NATO because it's afraid of Russia invading. What do you suppose? And then NATO is there saying, well, we're not going to deny them the right to join us. I mean, yes, we know that they've wanted to join us for ages, and we haven't accepted them because, they won't accept a member that has Russia already basically occupying part of it. Same problem with Moldova, same problem with Georgia. So, but at the same time, we don't care how hard you punch Ukraine in the face. We defend their right to join our club. The whole thing is just so messed up. But, I do... Yeah, so I'm definitely not an expert. I'm just an alarmed observer. But that is like some people pointing out that there are news reports that an order has been given to start invading, like today. OSCE reported 2,000 ceasefire violations in the Donbass region in one day. 1 or 2 is kind of like, whoops, but 2,000, something's going on. And the fact that this is happening almost at the same time as the Olympics closing ceremony is like, Putin's like, yes, we will not invade, former client state until after you finish, after friendly dictator state, finishes their Olympics. And how, again, the Winter Olympics is finishing. Look, it's just me. I'm from New Zealand. Winter sports, so we have mountains, we have skiing. Actually, the Japanese ski team trains in New Zealand during the wintertime and summertime in Japan. Where it's, of course, winter in New Zealand. We have, as the Southern Hemisphere goes, good skiing, but the Southern Hemisphere doesn't really have proper skiing anywhere. You've really got to come up to the Northern Hemisphere. So I don't know. I just didn't grow up with winter sports. I don't mind watching a game of curling or ice hockey or whatever. It's fun, but I'm not really. It's not, to me. Winter sports are sort of exotic and irrelevant. So I'm not going to say that it's a moral thing that I've boycotted the Winter Olympics on a morality stand, because honestly, I'm just not that interested in it in the first place. It's not a moral stand. But all of that said, it is kind of remarkable, one, that this is a really interesting, I mean, there are precedents for hosting Olympics at dodgy times, the 1936 Olympics, just before the Holocaust started. You've got the Sochi Olympics just after Chechnya, and, a couple of other sort of invasions and wars that Russia had done. But the fact that this time we've actually crossed over and we're allowed a country to host the Olympics while it's doing a genocide. And also the fact that you think of all the Olympics and all of the political stunts that happen in every Olympics. Somebody will do something political at some point. And the fact that doesn't appear to have happened once in this whole Winter Olympics seems to convince me both that, China's kind of gotten away with it, and, idealism is completely out the window. That, we're going to host these in Myanmar next. Obviously not the Winter Olympics. But on top of that, it seems like everyone was either apathetic to the fact that there are allegedly tens to hundreds of thousands and possibly more than that Uyghurs in re-education camps detained at the moment. I mean, and the term concentration camp has become a motive because it's been associated with the extermination camps, of course, of the Nazis. But the Americans themselves referred to the camps where they concentrated ethnic Japanese as concentration camps. The terminology was changed after World War II because of the German associations with the term, or how the Germans did it. But this is what China has, right? They are concentrating and aggregating and detaining lots of people. And the fact that not a single athlete either cared enough or they were intimidated by China and they were afraid and they didn't protest this whole time makes me think, geez, what's happening with that? All of that said, again, a bit like with the Russian soldiers, I'm not against I appreciate the hard work that goes into hosting an Olympics from the volunteers, and I'm sure that the Chinese volunteers that helped run the Olympics were good-natured and they wanted to do something genuinely to help with the international community. So, I kind of like nothing against the athletes, nothing against even the volunteers and everything, actually appreciation for all the hard work that they put in, but it was clearly a mistake to do that in the first place, so that's kind of bugging me. It really feels kind of dark at them. I mean, this is like seriously like 1930s, like Poland stuff that's happening in Ukraine right now, and it really disturbs me a lot. And I really hope that we don't allow it to pass or to, in some way to reward behavior, because this is just it. If it proves that the West is not going to do anything to discourage or deter this, then it's got implications for this part of the world. You can bet that other nations with geopolitical issues with America and territorial claims around them are going to be paying attention in this part of the world. I believe that. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of freaky anyway. So I've been watching that, but not much other news. Let's just back into the greetings. Anyway, that was a big distraction. That's not going to be part of the show. Question for the comments. Has anyone checked out the audio version of this? Not a lot of hits on that, but yeah, I did get actually a couple of DMs saying that people really appreciated me putting an audio version of this out. I find that remarkable that people like my voice or will listen to this in that format. But it's actually not hard. It takes about 5 minutes to trim this off. I basically, as you can tell if you ever check out the audio podcast, which is linked in the information below, I just keep the immediate greeting. I take out all this chit-chat greeting part. I just get straight to the stories pretty much, and then I just leave that unedited until the end. So it means that the hour show is normally about 40 minutes on the audio version, but yeah, it's a nice way if you listen to podcasts or whatever in your car or whatever, and you want to catch up on what I see going on in Japan. I'm really glad if people use it anyway. And it's free, which is for me always the big barrier, and it's easy, so I don't mind doing this every week actually. But yeah, at the same time, I really enjoy it the most, of course, when you can join me here live and I can say hello to you. So yeah, that's a good thing. Anyway, back into the comments. Who else is in here? We've got, so thank you, John Anderson, Kerberos Tenchi. Do I have any idea how expensive gasoline petrol is in Japan right now? It's probably way cheaper than over here in Germany. I've heard it is like nearly at record prices. There were some news stories saying it was getting up to 170, 180 yen per litre in some places. I don't own a car, so it doesn't really directly affect me in my day-to-day life like it does probably most people. Even in Japan, most people have cars. It's just a Tokyo thing that, people don't have, like me, don't have cars. So I think that's the case. I understand it is record highs, but I don't know how bad it is in Germany, of course. Frozen chat on screen. Oh, maybe that was just me not scrolling. Sorry about that, Mr. Cordychap. The delay is massive. Sorry, I was holding it in place while I was scrolling down, saying hello to people. We've got Ellen Rydacker, 160 yen per litre for regular. Yeah, I think it depends on where you are too. But that sounds about right. Juan Johnson, waving back at you. Yeah, good to see you in here. We've got, sorry about the chat delay. That was literally me not scrolling. Sorry about that. We've got Timmy Asianing. Boom, 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 boom. Good to see you. We've got Andrea Moboy with the sunglasses on. Great to see you. Nice to have you in here. See you next week. Early start tomorrow. Hi, bye. Hope you do catch the show. Good to see you as always, Andrea. Catch 22 indeed. Quint Ranked. NATO shouldn't interfere, says Black Tengu. Well, indeed. I mean, it's one of these things. Well, Yes, Black Tengu. But this is the problem. If Ukraine was in NATO, like Estonia is, for example, Estonia is not getting threatened right now, and you have to think that's partly because it's in NATO and Ukraine isn't, and that's why it is being threatened. So there is this sort of catch-22 situation. I think Ukraine is correct to believe that it's only security against, Russia basically having its way with it, which is definitely what's happening right now, is being in NATO. And the fact that NATO doesn't want to accept anyone that doesn't meet the dress code, or, basically because they've got Russia like already on their backs and NATO doesn't want to get into a fight, well, that's kind of like the end of it, right? But there again, who wants to send people to die, right? And who wants to get into a war with Russia? But at the same time, if you're not willing to at least convince Russia that you're willing to get in the fight with them, then Russia is going to have at it. So I don't know. I mean, in a peace situation, I'm curious, Black Tengu, in a total peace situation, do you think that NATO should refrain from admitting Ukraine? I have a thought as well that it'd be difficult to admit it when it has two large regions occupied by Russia already. So how can, that it's kind of in a low-level civil war? You've got a problem there. Does that commit NATO to participating in the civil war to the extent it already involves Russia? And that's deliberate. It's almost like you'd have to make a condition of membership that they have to just give up on those territories. So I don't know. It's a mess, isn't it? Kerberos Tenchi. They also allowed Russian athletes, even though Russia had been banned from the Olympics for continuous doping scandals. Olympics is just money for the IOC. Well, they had the Olympic Committee, which was all of the clean, non-drug using athletes, which of course that worked out really well. And again, I don't want to bash on a 15-year-old girl, but yes, it's complicated. Dan H., I love how we put moral issues forward when non-Western countries do something bad, but ignore their own. Yeah, we're hypocrites, absolutely. If we go by pure numbers, Western countries have a lot more blood on their hand in recent years. Absolutely. What was America doing in Afghanistan for how long was it? 20 years? Absolutely. But there again, if you've got a country asking for defense from you, and if they're asking to join a defensive alliance, then, I don't know that it's exactly the same as the Taliban asking for help. Although that said, I actually think that as horrible as the Taliban was in many ways, America had no business doing anything more than trying to get bin Laden and getting out. The mission of occupying Afghanistan for 20 years was just ridiculous. Robert Old Dude, good to see you, Robert Old Dude. Greetings, everybody. Shibas, you made it. Quentin Rankin, didn't Germany get into Afghanistan? I think they did. Well, again, that's right. Certainly NATO was officially involved in Afghanistan and in Libya and in Serbia. So, they have definitely gone outside, and some of those things I think were in some ways questionable. Although, those are all complicated, and I'm not expert enough to talk about them. We've got Crown. Good to see you. 171 per litre there in Kyushu. Yeah, I've heard in some parts of the country that's what it's been getting up to. DJ Sunny Side Up, you're a great idea for the audio version. I'm liking Twitch with that. For the music production, just post the highlights onto YouTube. That's pretty cool. Do you have a lot of trouble editing to get the highlights? So I think that's a good system. Premium in Toronto is $1.9, $1.90 a litre. Those being Canadian dollars. That reminds me of the Caddyshack joke with Chevy Chase. Was that the final? Oh no, that was it's a variation on the Chevy Chase joke from Caddyshack, which probably nobody here knows. Have you ever heard of the sound of a crisp $20 bill? There's an extension of that joke I've heard where someone still stays, and then he says, "Do you accept Canadian dollars?" But anyway, yes. Seems Russian government is acting like police officer that pulls you over and then acts like a I think they're literally being the old cliched southern states in the movie police officer that goes up and smashes all the taillights and then tries to lynch you for having a bad taillight or something. That's pretty. They're being pretty dark at the moment. John Carlo Lanoy, good to have you. I believe from Philippines. Good to have you back in here. Excellent to see you. Quinn Reagan, what were we doing in Afghanistan? The US was attacked by people based there. That's why we were there. No, that's right. They had every right to go in there after Al Qaeda, but staying in there, occupying the whole country for 20 years, I think they lost sense of their mission being there. It wasn't the mission there wasn't to, they had every right. By the way, I'm not disputing that America had a right to attack the people who attacked it in Afghanistan, even to attack the government of Afghanistan, but to occupy the country for more than 20 years, the longest war in American history. And remember, the nation of Afghanistan didn't have anything to do with it. They were just the place that they were hiding. I mean, when everyone pulled out, nobody could really remember what the mission was in the first place. But, bin Laden had been dead for 10 years. So, yeah, killed in a Pakistani military camp, of all places. So, the point being that, sure, America invades other countries too, and everyone thinks they have their reasons. Russia thinks they have their reasons, but in the end of the day, sure. Barry Bonds, MU Man. I don't know what MU Man means, but Barry Bonds, good to have you in the chat here as always. Not a problem to edit, says DJ Sunny Side Up. Oh, that's pretty cool. I get 5 minutes. That's sweet. Dan H. America started the Maidan thing, the coup in Ukraine in 2015. Yeah, there is that part of it. I mean, whether it was a coup, they backed people who, yeah, they certainly did. They were involved in that. That was a color revolution type thing. Anyway, we've got, hey, says Erin. I think she's sensing the squirrels, and we're 25 minutes in the show, and I do not have many topics, so I'm going to do that. Robert Old Dude, yeah, if the adults were puttering, you probably wouldn't have gotten the joke, but it's worth going back to. We aren't into the topics yet. Milchman 2, welcome. I am getting into the topics now. The other day, after everybody basically saying to the Japanese government and Kishida, what is the purpose of Japan being the most sealed, and the way the Japanese government's been messaging this is that Japan has the harshest, strictest border control measures of the whole G7, which is a pretty small group. It's not the OECD, it's not the UN, it's the G7. But emphasizing that Japan has had, and even after the opening up measures, will still have the strictest border measures of the whole G7 for all that counts for. They have been facing criticism, I mean, not just from the students who have been stranded outside of Japan for 2 years, for families unable to reunite, from business visa people, from apprentice visa workers who are needed basically to help many Japanese farms and small factories and so on remain economically viable, as well as nurses, as well as caregivers. 400,000 people that the Japanese economy, needs in a lot of cases, at least certainly particularly the 180,000 apprentice visa people waiting, has meant that at first it was just rumbling from the outsiders, and no question, these measures of closing the border, like they are in every country, keeping the foreigners out is never an unpopular thing to do anywhere. But it wasn't only the foreigners. It got to the point where even Japanese business lobby groups, where the Ministry of Education was starting to say that, I think they were realizing that it could result in, for example, if the students don't get in 2 years in a row, Japan's going to lose its ability. And the way that they sold this on NHK is not only to accept and have foreign full fee student paying students, but also that it was resulting in an ending of reciprocity, that Japanese would lose the opportunity to be able to study overseas. Because other universities were getting annoyed at their own students being screwed over by the Japanese border closure. So the loudest lobbying first came from the Ministry of Education, saying that this had to change at least for the students. But then, of course, the different business lobby groups came in. The health lobby groups said that we don't have enough people to help look after all the elderly, especially with COVID. We need to let nurses in from Philippines and Indonesia, which they've been trying to increase. Then all the farmers and the manufacturers said, hey, if we don't get our factory workers back, all of this production, and this is a real thing. I've had 2 house electrical situations happen in the last 6 months. And each time it's been weeks to be able to get the parts ready, because the factories are shut down that supply the parts that needed to be replaced are shut down because of COVID. But I'm sure that probably has something to do with worker shortages at the moment in Japan. And then the Keidanren, the chief, arm in arm, hugging in bed with the Japanese government business group, actually said, hey, government, this whole this whole thing was intended to slow down COVID, to slow down Omicron getting into the country. But of course it's here. So what are we still doing? And so, in a press conference right during the 7 o'clock news, I think on Thursday, in fact, 16th, so that was Wednesday, the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida got on TV, and after saying first that they would be easing, emergency measures in Okinawa, extending in some other places, he said that the Japanese government would be basically easing border control policies. Details are not exactly firm yet, but at the moment they're going to do some things like, for example, they will allow basically all people with visas to enter Japan for any reason other than tourism. So all of the working spousal, student visas and whatever will be allowed to come in, except of course that there is right now, of course Japanese can come in and out as well as residents like myself can go in and out. There is a quota of 3,500 people per day at the moment, and they're going to increase that to 5,000 people per day. But remember that 5,000 is including Japanese people, so it's basically going to be probably maximum 2,000 per day, and there are 400,000 people waiting. So there is a question whether that's going to be enough. There's also a question, why do it now, like when deaths are at the highest level that they've ever been and we're at the peak of another wave? But of course, I think the mistake that happened last time was they decided to ease the immigration when it was at the bottom of the waves. And of course, it started getting worse and they had to change their minds like a week later. It's probably better to do it now when it's frankly as bad as it's going to get. And it's probably going to get, it's going to be a while before it gets, it should be improving, although it's improving slowly at the moment. It is getting slowly better now. The numbers are, it's getting, the daily new cases are going down. But of course, now we're getting the serious cases and the deaths every day are increasing like crazy here. So, and the strain on the medical system is, of course, increasing. You've got that, but nonetheless, it's good to see reason prevail. And for people, including, friends of my own who have tried to get into the country, who have been waiting to come and work in Japan and do roles in Japan and so on, and study in Japan, 2 years, some people have been waiting. So it's a good thing that has indeed finally been eased up. Some quiet criticism that it was happening. It is a bit strange to be opening the country at the peak of one of these waves. But now there is proper, quarantine. By the way, quarantine period is now going to be made 3 days. If you can produce a second negative test on the third day, you can exit quarantine after 3 days. So, and of course, you have to be vaccinated to be able to come in. Just common sense stuff, which applies to everybody at the moment. But it is finally getting better anyway. So, lots of students telling stories about how, particularly with students, how this is kind of disruptive to, your starting life, frankly, and for 2 years, and the fact that the government's done it without any plan or formula, they've finally responded to that. So some actually really great news. Some more details of this to come, obviously, but obviously this has been a huge thing for foreigners waiting to come to Japan for a long time, and I think it's done harm to the country. I mean, no question. This has reduced the number of people interested in learning in Japan, which in turn is going to harm Japan's soft power. It's caused a lot of companies to reconsider plans to invest further in Japan and to set up or to expand their presence in Japan. And they've looked to other more friendly jurisdictions like Korea, of all places, and Hong Kong. Which should objectively be insane. To me, is insane that you would pick those places as more liberal and accessible than Japan. But for the last couple of years, that's the way that it's been. So, good news is that the polls reacting to this have found that, although you'd expect in any country, it's never immigration, even when everything's fine, immigration is never a popular thing. People generally, are negative on it. But even with this, there's a general majority. I think it was about 50% all up that were that generally positively rated the change. I think people understand the need for it, even if they don't realize it, even if they don't feel it directly affecting them. Which actually I think shows that Japan is actually not as entirely xenophobic as its image. But there again, Japan has a xenophobic immigration right now. You could say that its approach is xenophobic because it is actually literally assuming that people with different passports, it's natural, of course, that you favor your own citizens in terms of allowing them in and out of the country. But there seems to be a scientific assumption somehow that people without Japanese passports are more contagious, which seems flawed. So that's the first bit of good news. Let's dive into the comments and see what's going on in there. John Carlo Illinois, what's happening now in the world? Well, we're just talking about that, and I'm not going to chase that rabbit hole because I will talk for a whole hour about that. We've got Calderon Bruce, Vin, FYI, good to know. Thank you for that comment. We've got DJ Sunny Side Up. You learned so much from me. I'm humbled and embarrassed and very glad to. I'm glad to know you. I am. Eric Bailey sounds like the Zaibatsu, or I mean Keiretsu, a few black ships of their own. Well, the Keidon-ren are basically the successor of the nicer, friendlier, huggier, kindlier Keiretsu Zaibatsu thing. Aaron, so no tourist visas, and if not, when? Well, at the moment there's mathematically speaking, there's 400,000 people with current valid non-tourist visas waiting to get into Japan. And assuming that on current quarantine capacity, that they're going to be a maximum of like 2,000 people coming in every day, that's 200 days. And that's assuming, of course, that we don't go through any more crazy waves or have different crazy variants. So best case, I don't know. I mean, one might hope that they might start to talk about reopening tourism in the second half of the year, but I think it'll be like the end of the year. There will be pressure, certainly. If other countries like America and Europe, I mean, Europe seems to have pretty much, like UK, I'm hearing is allowing people to travel now. So it sounds like, those countries reopening tourism is going to put pressure on Japan, but I think Japan's going to be way after all of them and only after it looks like it's safe. So I would say, my guess, there's no information on this at all, but if I were to plug a guess, I might say September at the earliest, and more likely November or December, and that's everything going well. So it's still a long time yet, but yeah. Cobras Tenshi, that's good news. Maybe I can finally get back to Japan soonish. Germany will drop its COVID regulations in steps until March 20th, a day they now call Freedom Day. Freedom! Yeah. Well, certainly, if you can get a work visa, you'll be able to come, no doubt, soon enough. And yeah, I think tourism, in the end of the day, I do, again, it depends if this really does, if this is how it ends, where in terms of, Victor, I was actually watching Give Me a Break Man doing Give Me a Flake Man doing a long podcast the other day, and he was talking about he had read with Spanish flu. Apparently, it was the same thing. It went through all these sort of different waves. And, and again, he said that he had read something in the New York Times. Take that as you will. But he had read something in the New York Times that was talking about what the goal of viruses. The goal of viruses is not to kill as many people as possible. The goal of viruses is to multiply as fruitfully as possible, just like all other forms of life and quasi-life, I guess, depending on how you classify a virus. So from that perspective, what happened with the Spanish flu, which is a horribly named virus, that was the American flu spread by American soldiers traveling to World War I, and they blamed Spain, neutral Spain, for it as a propaganda thing. But anyway, the Spanish flu, apparently they decided it just became more and more mild, and then it became endemic, basically. It never disappeared. It just became a weaker virus, like a regular flu or cold variant in the end. So again, he said that he had read an optimistic view that maybe these variants are going to get weaker, with the goal of eventually getting to everybody, but just in the sense that we do less to fight back against it. And apparently, 2 or 3 years into the Spanish flu, people just sort of gave up, and it kind of just mellowed out. And if the hope is that this is the signal that that's the direction that we're going, but there again, I mean, yeah, I still, even the one right now is still pretty scary. There are more people catching it, but there's more deaths as well. The death rate is not as high for people who are catching it, but it's scary. But I do hope that perhaps this opening up, that everybody just says, screw this, let's just go back to normal and live with it a bit and see if it eases back. Maybe it's going to work. So Cobras Tenshi, cheers to that. Hope that that's how it works. Dan H. How is this affecting the overall Japanese economy, considering a large part of the Abe administration pushed a pro-tourist economy? Well, indeed. I mean, so the big focus really in the last 2 years of economic aid for all the industries that were suffering, like the air industry and everything else, it was all focused mainly on the tourism industry. Go to Japan was all about subsidizing Japanese people trying to fill the economic gap being suffered by tourist destinations. So it's had a big impact. and all of these stimulus, and the fact that they were subsidizing people moving around within Japan while they were trying in a reaction to a virus. Of course, it was controversial, but Go to Japan was exactly the reaction to that. So, in terms of the overall economy, I mean, kind of not great. But tourism isn't that big of a section of the economy, I think, overall. But overall economy not great. But the tourism part of the economy has been probably set back decades, probably back to when Koizumi set the targets for tourism back in 2002, which I thought were a joke. But then Japan got them. But yeah, it's definitely set things back. Odie Jr., you're late, but at least you're not pregnant. Boom. Well, if that's good news for you, it's good news for me. So good to have you in here, Odie Jr. Wow, so many people in the comments. Let's rock through this. Sadiq Hakangur, it's great to see you there. Good to have you with us, our man from Florida. Also good to see Christopher Luke. JZM, wow, so many people here in the great to see everybody saying hello. EDR made it. Also Tokuhiro made it. Yes, indeed. Ben Toro there, good to have you in the comments. And Savas Musician, 200 days. Shutters won't reopen in Osaka's Dotonbori. Yeah, it's been pretty tough. Dan H, talking about Victor, when are we going to do a show together again? I think we're both just gotten into life has just gotten really busy. But I would love to do a show with him again, but it's just personal time gets so precious and short. I won't make a promise, but the band will definitely get back together sometime this year. Anyway, I mean, I guess we could do a show instead of this sometime, or do a Tokyo Tonight. I mean, it'd go completely off the rails, but I think that would be the objective. So I think we could do a 2.5 Voyages. Yeah, we should do another one sometime. We certainly, well, we're not calling each other as much as we used to, but I think we both just respect that he's got a very busy life. And I do as well. We're just trying to squeeze out the time that we can, but hopefully soon. I would love to do another show myself. Also, I see we've got Russian Chatbot up there in the top there. Welcome, Russian Chatbot. Please don't invade. Crown, Black Tengu, everyone. Okay, next story. Wow, second story. It is 11:10. I don't have many topics, but we're going to be late again. That's the way things go. It's a feature, not a bug. Not a big one, just a random one, but reported crime in Japan hits post-war low for the 7th year running. Japan is ridiculously low crime. I mean, it's one of these things that anyone watching this show has probably been to Japan or knows enough about Japan to know it's ridiculously safe. New Zealand is kind of famous for being relatively low crime, although I think that reputation has probably slipped a little bit since the time that I was there more than 20 years ago. But even compared to New Zealand, Japan is still a place where, you drop a wallet full of cash, you leave it on a bus or in a taxi, and it will find its way back to you based on your ID, and it will come back to you with all the cash in it every time. Yeah, it's just one of the things that's just nice about this country. However, so if a country already doesn't have crime, how does it reduce? Interesting. I mean, it appears to be what's dropping the most is bicycle theft and property damage. Murders, robbery, arson, which are already pretty low, are about the same, but the big reductions have been property damage, theft. So yeah, again, I don't know what is behind the drop in that sort of petty crime. There was certainly a thing that when I came to Japan, maybe this is happening less. It was like crappy bicycles. Like, one thing about Japan I kind of liked is the fact that you could buy a pretty decent mamachari. You could buy a mama bicycle with a basket on the front, at Don Quixote for like $80. And those things are like throwaway umbrellas. Some people buy them, use them once or twice, and deliberately throw them away. In fact, people throwing them away is why they register them, because the rubbish is such a problem. But there's also a thing that I think is less the case now, but it was definitely a thing up until my early time in Japan, that they were like public property. People would almost never lock them, and sometimes you get drunk people, someone who's in a rush to go somewhere, and they'll just grab a random bicycle from the train station and take it like it's a take a flyer kind of a thing. And I never had well, you know what? I did have a bicycle stolen. Although my bicycle that was stolen, I put outside, and I wasn't using it. I was living in Kashiwa, and I was like, how do I get rid of this bicycle before I move? I'm just going to put it outside the apartment and try to figure out how to throw away a bicycle. And then it disappeared one day. I was like, oh, great, it's gone. It's probably in North Korea now. Yeah, I think that kind of thing, and also the worst thing as well. Same thing happens with umbrellas, and that's just cruel, right? I've been in the middle of a typhoon where I went into a convenience store and I put my umbrella in the umbrella stand, and I went into the store, and when I came out, someone walking by had taken my umbrella, so left me without one. I mean, you can buy an umbrella in the store. In fact, you know what? That happened to me another time in a restaurant, and so I was stuck without an umbrella because someone else stole mine. I mean, to me, that's just like the lowest thing. So it's funny. Japanese would it's not a crime, or at least that's the way it used to be seen. Maybe that doesn't happen as much, and maybe that's the trend. But it is a nice thing that it's continuing to be already. I mean, how could they get even lower? Is a question you might ask, but certainly. Dan H says it might be due to things, or Dan H thinks it's due to less crime being reported and the overall population shrinking. Certainly, I mean, the amount of decrease is the population is shrinking, but not by 60% over 10 years. And not reporting is, of course, a problem with things like domestic violence and so on, which is something that I think people are assuming is happening right now with COVID and lockdowns and whatnot. Not that we've had real lockdowns here. I don't think that accounts for everything. Certainly, I think it accounts for part of it. I think also maybe not so much population shrinking per se, but just the number of single-child families. Again, nothing against large, 10-child, smoking on street corner sibling families. But certainly I think single-child families probably they feel like they can get away with less. So possibly that's part of the shift. It's interesting. I mean, I could only guess. Hey, Tai Nakamura, good to see you. And everybody else. Tokuhiro, good point. Umbrella's a shared commodity. It is not. It is not. My umbrella belongs to me. Don't take it. It is funny how there are those tricks that some people featured on Sora News, like putting a label on it, like property of the Tokyo Police Department. Although, again, I that wouldn't discourage the Japanese people that I know who consider it public property. Mr. Cordychat, population by 60%. Cannot laugh. Cannot laugh, indeed. Next story is actually, this is in the Shukan, the Bunshun Online, one of the big tabloid weeklies, and it sort of is a feature of particularly Vietnamese and not people like us, but more they've got Koreans and the much more prominent, when I say us, Western English speaking foreigners. Western English-speaking foreigners are a tiny percent of the foreigners in Japan, like less than 10% total. I went through the numbers the other week, but you can see we're probably like between 5 and 10% maximum. But among those people, the old microaggressions and the kind of how the toughest thing that Japanese, that Vietnamese and immigrants into Japan feel about is how when Japanese are probably just for chit chat half the time. When they go, oh, aren't you good at Japanese? Like when they say that to you like that, you just feel like, oh, now I feel like crap, It's intended to be a nice way to start a conversation, but, it is the classical microaggression. It's kind of patronizing and putting you down and making you feel crappy and put in your place at the same time as they're paying you a compliment, bless your heart. And there was a lot of commentary when I shared this tweet today, some people pointing out how there is the uncanny valley phenomenon. How when you suck at Japanese, everyone's comfortable. You are meeting their expectation of what a foreigner is supposed to be. When you're crappy at Japanese, like the person on the TV show or the movie of the foreigner with broken Japanese, who everybody likes, who's goofy. And everyone wants to be their friend. Yeah, you're the panda. Everyone comes up. And, but there is this thing that happens when you hit a certain point of being good where you kind of freak them out because they're expecting you to be, like, crappy. And, when you're good, they're like, they don't quite know where to place you. And then when you get really good, they'll stop treating you like a cute puppy dog. And they'll start treating you like an incompetent, irritating Japanese person. That you've made it when people stop paying you compliments, and actually, when they start actually hazing you, just like a slightly, slow learning Japanese person, which is really what I am. When they start treating you like that, oh yes, I've made it, and then you think, was this my goal? Was this what I've been working all this time to achieve? Is to get hazed like an incompetent Japanese person? But indeed, before you get to that stage, even the praise can be sort of awkward. I don't think it's always delivered with bad intent, but of course it's not. That's what a microaggression is. It's not the conscious intent. It's what it gives away in the subconscious, that, oh yes, you're meeting my expectations of a stereotype of what I expect you to be, and people can get upset when you break those stereotypes, particularly when you fall in that category where they're not sure whether to place you as a normal person by their standards who speaks Japanese normally, or as a foreigner, the way that they want to image you. Kind of good to see anyway that a Japanese tabloid picked this up and they featured it in a big way. It's one of those things that, as an immigrant, I lived here 25 years and started a family here, so I'm not an expat, I'm an immigrant, and I'm descended from immigrants, many along some lines who are not English speakers. So I can imagine how, I think it's always been the case that you feel the onus is on the person immigrating to assimilate, and I definitely feel that. So I it's not my way to really to want to attack Japanese people, and I don't think it's unique to Japan at all either. But it does make me think, I've got to make sure I don't do that. And look, from the perspective that they're raising awareness of this among Japanese people who read that, and it's a well-read publication, I'm kind of glad to see it there, even though I'm not. People could praise me for being, good at Japanese when I wasn't, all day. I never got that upset by it. And believe me, it was much more upsetting when I actually got good and then they actually started hazing me. Quickly back into the comments, got Cobras Tenshi. I only ever bought 3 umbrellas in Japan. One was stolen at a restaurant, one was destroyed by a gust of wind, and one was destroyed by a Japanese punk band on stage, stolen from my bag. That's kind of impressive in a way. I mean, that's memorable. So I think that's I'm impressed you got that far though. There is a funny thing in New Zealand, the land of the long white cloud. It's kind of a long white greyish cloud. The reason New Zealand is green is that it rains every day. Every day it rains in New Zealand, but the weather is like just changes every 5 minutes. It's sunny and then it's pouring and then it rains and then it's sunny, and the result is in New Zealand. Between that and the fact everyone has cars, no one carries umbrellas. If it rains, it doesn't really rain that heavily. It's always kind of half-assed rain. So there is this thing in New Zealand that if it rains, you just wait, or honestly, you just walk through it. But in Japan, you do not mess with the rain in Japan. In January, we only had 2 days of rain in Tokyo. Tokyo is just this beautiful place, particularly through the winter and the autumn. And if you watch my Twitter or whatever, you can see my running photos and videos that I've been shooting. Blue skies all the time, vitamin D, it's wonderful. But when we hit rainy season, you don't want to be messing with Japanese rainy season with no umbrella. So if you manage to get through that with 3 umbrellas, you've done a really good job. Anyway, back into the stories. There's actually not that much else there. There is some local councils are looking at the abandoned house problem. I've talked about this before. I'm not an expert on it, but to me it is a serious problem. It's a huge missed opportunity that people don't know how to figure out, and it's partly just because Japanese have such a strong sense of property rights. Like, even if the house is abandoned and they don't want to live there or do anything with it, they don't want to give it up to the government either. Most countries have laws that allow you, like, if they want to widen a road, they can just take a strip off the front of your land to do it in most places and pay you a minimum compensation. Japan doesn't have that sort of thing, right? The compensation that they pay for widening roads is enormous. So there's a lot of resistance generally to trying to address the problem of all these abandoned houses, which are contributing to these communities which are becoming ghost towns, because no one wants to live in a community full of vacant houses. And I think that, again, if local governments could figure out some way to collect up that land and they could convert it into public facilities, parks, things that could enhance the lifestyle and make those places attractive to people again, but instead they're becoming these rundown ghost towns that are like scaring people. Some of these places, now they're talking about adding taxes basically to abandoned houses. And I think, anything in a way, it's a good approach. I really think that for depopulation and for the perceived problem of centralization in Tokyo, again, I think Tokyo is great because of all the people coming here. And I'm a fan of Tokyo, so I'm not really for the idea of, per se, of having a policy of driving people out to rural areas. But there again, I think rural areas should, if they want to attract people, fix this problem. No one wants to move to your town full of rundown, abandoned houses and resorts. But if you actually take ownership of that land and clean it all up, you've got a great opportunity. So I think that's good to see that the government, well, local governments are starting to think about this. I think the national government really has to do more to give powers to basically allow local governments to take over and nationalize this sort of land for improvement where it happens, but that's just me. One Johnson, you seem to have 10 or more umbrellas. I'm sure I haven't bought that many. Maybe one is mine. Yeah, I've bought a lot of umbrellas, and I have like 3, and I'm bought like 100, so I'm pretty much giving them away, I think. Cobra Stenchi, I wear raincoats as they keep me just as dry. Even the big umbrellas only ever kept my upper body dry, just like a raincoat. That is true, you do get very wet shoes and bottom halves of legs, no matter what. You know what, raincoats probably do make sense, but in Japan it's just kind of weird to see someone just walking in the rain without an umbrella, just in a full raincoat. It's, while yes, they probably are the one being correct, you do look a little bit like an axe murderer in Japan. You would stand out. Plus you couldn't really go onto a train like that. But you know what, I think that doesn't matter, because Cobra Stenchi, I think you are right. Eric Bailey, if microaggression is the worst thing in your day, you've got a pretty good life. Yeah, I must admit, and actually when Debito came out with the literally microaggressions thing, that we need to stand up to microaggressions against us, I mean, he's a Japanese citizen, Caucasian race activist in Japan, who's kind of co-opted Black American racial issues as white Japanese racial issues, which I'm not entirely comfortable with, to tell you the truth. But it's not to say that these things don't exist. I agree. I have bigger things to worry about. It is nice, at least, that Bunshin is contributing to promoting a little bit of awareness about how silly it is for people to say that kind of thing. But I agree, it's not the biggest problem in the world. 3 more stories. One, you may have seen, I actually posted a video on YouTube the other day. I've shown you all before. In fact, it should just be here. Lately, not every time I go running, but about every second or third time when I go running, I run with this. And, I can extend it a little bit. The more I extend it, the heavier it gets. So I try to do it only about that much, pretty much. But if I just run, and it's not hard to be able to keep it fairly steady in one hand while I run, and it's got this amazing stabilization technology. It's a 360 camera. It is the Insta 361 X2 camera. It's like $500. It's about gomayem. This is like the best camera purchase I've made in ages. The resolution, of course, when you see it on YouTube on a PC, it doesn't look great there, but on mobile it looks good enough. But yeah, if I take this out when I'm running and I just take it for a short distance, the software associated with it just lets you cut these really, really awesome you can take great selfies where it looks like somebody's taking a shot of you while you're running, like you've got a cameraman running with you. But you can also very easily create these really awesome videos with it that show off the running courses. They show off Tokyo as I see it when I go running around. And I'm just thinking, I've got this great music matching software with licensed music built in, that you can make these great sort of cut-ups very, very easily, actually. And I posted one of those videos, a 3-minute video of that during the week. Only has like 100 views on it, but comments were positive, so I was quite happy about that. If you want to see something on this channel other than me talking for 1 hour, people seem to indicate that they'd be happy to see more. And actually, it's fun to make, and I'm thinking I might actually deliberately pick some running courses that are scenic, just so I can give you some musical running tours of Tokyo. Plus, they just look really cool. They look cool to me. So anyway, that was kind of cool. I posted a 3-minute, like a full song version of that, and I thought it came out really well. So check that out. The second and final story of the week is a lot of space new stuff at the moment, including Isaacson, the guy who did the Inspiration SpaceX mission. They just did an announcement that again, this billionaire is going to be doing 3 more missions, including where he's going to be doing a spacewalk, where he's going to be testing out SpaceX's new EVA suit. There's a lot of people that criticize. I'm just a huge space travel fan, of course. I've got the Neutron rocket and the Starship behind me. They're 3D printed. But I mean, all of these people who say that we shouldn't be spending money on space, we should be spending it on the real problems of ordinary people here today. I always hear that and I think, I wonder, what, that's probably what people thought in, UK, going back to my history, back when they were colonizing the New World. Why spend money on, colonies off in America and Australia and so on when, there are problems here in the UK. Of course, what the UK ended up doing was exporting literally their problems to the poor people. They basically, as a population control and poverty reduction measure, actually shipped all the poor people to America and Australia, either as convicts or as just transported regular people to fill up those colonies. And those colonies were disasters for the most part for a long time. But of course, what happened with the colonies, I really think of these in those terms. In the end of the day, it wasn't the British government that was always paying for those colonies. They actually set up companies. Each of the original US states were companies. The New Zealand company, the Australian company, there were companies that were set up to basically to try to figure out how to set up a colony, and make it profit generating to be able to fund sending more people over there, figuring out what to mine and what to do. And that's kind of, I think, it's going to be the same story with space, except it won't entail genocide and taking, countries away from people that already, for taking away countries that already belong to other people, as was unfortunately the case of European colonization. But it is the same thing in space. I think it's natural that you'll have private companies doing it and private companies looking to start to do it in a way that becomes self-funding eventually. And I think in the big picture, would anyone look back now and say it was foolish of Britain to spend money on setting up colonies in America? Loaded question. Of course, there are lots of people who would say that was a crime against humanity that they did that, that they stole a whole continent. But at the same time, most Americans would say, no, that's the product, right? You look back now and say, wasn't it great that they did that? Well, unquestionably, there's going to be a time when people are going to say, why didn't we get into space in more of a hurry when we were able to? It's like discovery. I mean, literally, it took hundreds of years, I guess, for people to, for cities to form in America as well, these colonized cities to start in America after it was identified by, again, the parallels are tricky, but, there was a long gap between when it was accessible to people in the modern age from Europe and when they actually decided to live there. But I think this is the same thing as that sort of a context. So there's a point here arguing as well, the fact it's becoming increasingly private and self-funded and it's less dependent on taxes. And, I don't think this is billionaires having fun either. I think this is genuinely, in the long term, in the big picture, these are the things that will be looked back upon in human history as the most important things that we're doing. And that's why I think it's super cool that we're doing these and that it's jumping ahead. I mean, that's me. Couldn't rank it. Don't forget the religious dissidents. Yeah, I know that Americans like to think that they were all like the original colonists were pilgrims, but no, most of them were prisoners. I mean, Australia took over from America as where Britain sent all of its criminals. It's kind of funny. America doesn't get into the convict narrative as much as Australia does, but it's exactly. I mean, basically, America stopping sending convicts, Britain stopping sending convicts to America resulted in Australia. But yes, basically everybody that they didn't want, they sent out. And who knows? I mean, maybe. I like to think we're in a more enlightened age. We won't be sending religious groups to Mars on purpose anymore. But who knows? We could be putting our next Alcatraz on the moon or something like that. I mean, try escaping from that makes kind of sense. Final thing is, I don't really know what the Super Bowl is. It just appears to be a lot of commercials and a music concert. I hear it used to have something to do with football, but again, just as someone who consumes news and social media, I can't really see any football at all in any of the discussions. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Larry David was in a cryptocurrency ad. I don't care much for cryptocurrency, but it just shows him in different times in history looking at really good ideas, saying that they're terrible ideas. And one of those included the invention of the Walkman, like at a board meeting, freaking out, saying, you know, what's wrong with you? Don't invent a Walkman. You should definitely watch the video clip of it. Some people immediately came out. It was kind of funny, the reaction. All of the weebs, the people who, you know, started saying, oh yeah, his Japanese didn't sound perfect, you know, didn't sound very good. It was like a foreigner speaking Japanese or something. And I guess maybe if your point of reference is, did he sound like an anime character? No, he didn't sound like an anime character. But Larry David's Japanese was astounding. It was really good. It was so good. I'm positive he didn't read it. It wasn't done off a script. I'm sure they probably had a Japanese person there feeding him the lines, and he was just parroting it, because the pronunciation is excellent. I mean, I'm a huge Larry David fan. That's where I should start with. But his Japanese in the board meeting, him freaking out, it's shouting Japanese at everyone, is really good. I mean, like really good. It's as good as you'll get. Anyone leaving a comment saying that, yeah, he's like 80%, no, that's as good as I would be proud. If I was in that board meeting looking at him, I would assume that he was a long-term resident, you know, at least for those few phrases. He got them out really well. Intonation and everything, which is why I clearly wasn't read. It was clearly done by ear. So anyway, that was awesome. So check that out. That was the highlight of the whole Super Bowl. I guess Larry David won the Super Bowl. I think that's what happens. If you have the best commercial, you win the Super Bowl. That's how it works. Now, I don't know. American sports, who can figure it out? That is all the stories. I'm only 5 minutes over, so you see there wasn't so much to talk about. Not a lot of Japan news, honestly, but that's a good thing. Probably Russia, please don't include Russian chatbot. I think I saw you earlier. Please don't invade Ukraine. They're very nice people. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Everybody stay safe from the Rona. It is still, you still don't want to get it. It still looks pretty awful. I am going to continue having a quiet life. I will talk to you all same time, same place next week. Thank you for keeping me company. Remember, if you like the video, please do like. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Honestly, my subscriber count hasn't changed in like 10 years. I'm not sad, just disappointed. It's okay. But if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, of course. If you like, please like. I just do this for peanuts and likes, seriously. So throw me a peanut, hit the like button. I'll be back here next week. Check out the audio version from the link below if you want to go and listen to this in your car. And stay safe. Follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with everything. Have a great week. Kakita no peace. Boom. Saying goodbye now. Reading the comments. See ya.